Welcome to Conversations with Deborah, a bilingual, I always say bilingual, a bi-coastal dialogue brought to you by exclusively on malcolmpresents.com with me,
Yay.
Malcolm Berman, and my co-host, the beautiful and talented Deborah Manning.
Hi, Malcolm. How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm great. My name is Deborah Manning, native Southern Californian, and used to be a news reporter of all things. That's actually where Malcolm and I met several years ago. We've been longtime friends. And I moved back here to South Carolina from Southern California about 6.5 years ago with my husband.
South Carolina. You have to put your
South Carolina.
because you could be a Southern Belle.
I guess I could, because I said, thank you kindly. And everybody would say in California, are you from the South? I don't think so, but who would have thought? Who would have ever thought? So how's everything with you?
I'm from the South Brooklyn.
There you go. There you go. Well, it's been a quiet news week, hasn't it, Ben?
Oh yeah, nothing new.
Lazy. So let me get your feedback on the situation with Ukraine. What in the world should we do? Should we be sending planes over to them? Should we be enforcing a no-fly zone? What should we do?
I think we're doing what we should be doing, which is doing the sanctions. Now, whether you say whether the sanctions are enough or whether you say whether we should have done it earlier, that's another question. But the things what we're doing is we're cutting them off. We're isolating them. We're dealing with someone that you can't, there's no rhyme or reason, you know, so he's not, from what I see, he's not rational. If he was rational, he wouldn't be doing this.
He's old time Soviet. I think you have to admit that. And we saw that because we grew up in the times of Nikita Khrushchev and, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where President John F. Kennedy had to deal with the installation of missiles in Cuba, 90 miles away from the United States. So he's an old time Russian. Well, he's KGB, for heaven's sakes. So,
but the question is, I think I don't know if you know, you heard Biden today, but he said, you know, you don't want to risk World War III, which if we either send planes or we send troops, I think that could take you for World War III.
I hate to remind anybody about this, but I think we've already seen World War III. I think it started with the pandemic back in January, February of 2020. When we were confronted with this COVID, which I think it's interesting because people ask me, well, you know, did it come from the lab? Did it come from the wet market? Where did it come? I don't really care where it came from, to be very honest with you. Bottom line is that China and the Chinese government, the communist Chinese, should have had the responsibility of controlling this virus. They didn't. And one can only assume at this point right now, their lack of responsibility that essentially killed more than 6 million people throughout the world, unleashed essentially a war on every single one of us. So Ukraine and the Russians coming in and devastating civilians. I think it's, be very honest with you, it's a continuation. I think the one thing that we do risk at this point is in terms of isolating Russia, you know where they're going to go. They're going to go to China. And at this point right now, I am a little bit concerned, a little bit more than concerned about the friendship and the alliance between China and Russia. So no, I think we need to be careful. I have to tell you that the scenes that I'm seeing from the news media that are embedded with the troops there, the Ukrainian troops, amazing. But one thing has to be said. I think it's very interesting that the Ukrainian army is using the Javelin missiles that the former administration, the Trump administration, delivered to the Ukrainians. So I'm happy to see that. It was interesting to see that group of tanks that were surrounding Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, being destroyed with the Javelin missiles. And I think by arming people who want to fight, and these Ukrainians want to fight for their country, they have every reason to fight for their country. I think that's a great way to go. So,
Yeah, I agree. But my question to you now, one
hmm,
question which I just came up to my mind. Poland has MiG planes, right?
yeah.
How did they get them?
Well, I think that they were acquired. I think they were acquired with
Soviet
the
Union?
demise in the 1990s of Soviet of USSR. So I think that's how they acquired them.
But so are they up to date to fight
I don't think that they are up to
maneuver?
date.
And also, how are the Ukrainians trained by the pilots trained on them?
That's, that's another point. I think that if Poland wants to give the MiGs to the Ukrainian army, I think that's perfectly fine. Once again, I just this whole situation. Um, I do wish that we had a stronger position, a far stronger position. I think we gave that away, starting with the debacle in Afghanistan. And it's once again proof that you're looking at enemies of the United States taking advantage of a weak uh, presidency, and
Why
it's
do you
going
say
to be
weak?
it's going to get worse before it gets better.
If he was a strong president, what would he do?
What would he have done?
Yeah.
I think probably what the prior administration would have done, which was essentially, and I think it's very interesting, uh, massive criticism from the news media primarily when former President Trump, during his speech to CPAC, which is the group of the conservative group that met about 2 weeks ago, there was a huge outcry when President Trump called Putin smart and a genius. Well, I have to tell you, after also I've done quite a bit of international travel with my late husband, that uh, in terms of giving deference to a quote unquote enemy, um, those are simply words. And once again, Trump knew how to confront uh, this this brute in such a way that he did not move during the Trump administration. And I think that if we would have been far firmer and would have shown strength, that I don't think that we would have had this sort of a situation. I think that we're being taken advantage of, truly being taken advantage of. And I just my heart bleeds with the Ukrainians. They
Okay,
truly do.
be specific. How are we taken advantage of?
I beg your pardon?
How are we taken advantage of by Putin?
Well, I mean, at this point right now, he felt very much like it was fine for him to go ahead and take over the Ukraine. I think that things probably got away from him as he started to approach the borders almost a month and a half ago, the borders of Ukraine. And I, once again, there was no response whatsoever from this administration as the tanks were gathering on the border of Ukraine. I mean, what were they doing? Having a camping trip? I don't think so.
What were we supposed to do? That's a question.
Well, I think that there could have been something more than just the silence. I do believe that there would have been conversations back and forth, and perhaps something that maybe a flyovers of some sort. I'm certainly not a diplomat. I'm certainly not an international specialist. But bottom line is,
Fly over where?
I think we showed absolutely no strength, and we showed no resolve to stop Putin in his tracks. We simply didn't. So
Well, as far as that I heard for the people were President Biden was saying for months ago that they're going to be that Putin is going to invade Ukraine, and
and then
everybody
what
says,
did he do about it?
"Oh, what is he supposed to do about it?" He
Well,
threatened he threatened
you got to
sanctions.
admit that we haven't had this sort of an incursion into a sovereign nation since World War II. And we've had a number of
No,
presidents
no,
since
no,
then.
the last incursion to a sovereign nation was our incursion into Iraq.
Well, get me started on Iraq, but
Okay,
at any
but,
rate.
but anyway, the thing was, you have a crazy man in Russia,
You
and
don't
then
have a crazy man, you have a trained Soviet. It's the Soviet mind. He's once again, he's reassembling the old USSR, and he's not crazy. It's that's just the way, that's the Soviet
okay,
mindset.
okay. He's not crazy, but would you call him evil?
Well, once again, I mean,
Or what is
that's,
evil?
that's a wonderful Western way of looking at things. You travel the world, I've traveled the world. And bottom line is, in terms of evil and what have you, I think the things that he's doing in terms of bombing civilians, that act is evil. But once again, Putin is a product of the Soviet
Well, you're giving him
society.
you're giving him an excuse. But
I'm
the
not
question
giving
is,
him an excuse. I think by labeling him as being this or that is absolutely absurdity. He,
okay,
once again, we should have known what was going to happen, to begin with. Why do we have these State Department people, and why do we have these defense people not understanding and not protecting the United States? I mean, the other thing that just is driving me a little bit batty at this point is that now we're being told that the reason for the high gas prices, in fact, we've started to approach $4.50 here in South Carolina. And what's amazing to me is that President Biden is saying this is Putin's, what do you call it? Putin's inflation. I mean, this is a clown show. I'm sorry. That's absurd. Putin's inflation, not exactly. It's called Biden's inflation.
well,
So,
why would it be Biden's inflation?
well, he started it by putting the brakes on the oil and gas companies and the whole industry.
Yeah,
He
okay.
had nominations for the Fed plus the Federal Reserve, the banking committees, all of them who have said that we should deny bank loans to any oil or gas entities whatsoever. You know,
Well, I have a question. How come the oil companies are now reaping more profits than ever before?
they're not. Where did you get that
I
figure?
got that bottom line. Check it out. They were
Well, I
making,
have checked it out. One of the things is because they cannot drill. We are not drilling the kind of oil and gas, natural gas, that we need to be energy independent here in the United States. We have to go outside. And as a result, we were looking at gas and oil yesterday. We hit, I believe it was a $132 per barrel. I think we're finally back down to 117. But I mean, there's predictions now that we go up to $200 a barrel. Now, I ask you, how is a normal everyday American who perhaps can't, well, for example, in California, many people can't afford to live in the area that you're living, and many people are traveling hundreds of miles to get to work. Well, I think it's interesting now that they're having to go ahead and pay, what are you paying? $5.50 for gasoline now?
well, they have in parts of Beverly Hills they're charging $7.
Well, I mean, I mean, Beverly Hills probably can afford it. I mean, the wealthy can afford it. The average people like you and me and many of the people who watch this show probably are having problems affording the gasoline. And once again, I mean, we could be energy independent. We were energy independent with the prior administration. And because of
Excuse me?
the hatred of President Trump, all of a sudden we're reversing all of these good policies. You and I agree in terms of wanting to have green energy. I certainly do. My Lord, I recycle everything, et cetera, et cetera. But bottom line is, I want the technology there before we go ahead and completely sign off gasoline. I mean, once again, I don't want to use mass transit. There's not enough buses around here to get around. I know about for you, if you had to give up your automobile, would you be okay with that?
I gave up my automobile.
Well, that's good. Okay. But many people
My
can't.
wife doesn't, but
Well,
I'm not driving anymore.
no. But don't split hairs here, Malcolm. You know what I'm saying. Bottom line is that the cost of gasoline is terribly impacting average Americans. And who is it not impacting? It's not impacting very wealthy folks. And in fact, there's a lot of wealthy people in Washington, D.C. that seem to be completely ignorant of the plight of many hardworking Americans. And it's not just a Fox News news report. I find it amazing where I'm listening to MSNBC and CNN and even NBC, continuing to berate normal, average, everyday working Americans, saying, well, the reason that the gasoline is so high is, well, we need to go ahead and defend democracy. What the heck is that all about? Defend democracy? We have 5, 6, 7. We're going to be at $10 a gallon very soon for gasoline.
Stated on March 7th, 2022 in Facebook post, U.S. imports 1% of its oil from Russia. I heard it was 7%. While Exxon, Chevron, BP, and Shell profits are at their highest level in over 7 years.
I would fact check that, my dear.
I am.
I would fact check.
You fact check and let me know.
I hate to blast through the fact checkers of Facebook, but they have shown themselves to be rather biased in many different ways, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what their sources are, so I have to do.
That's right. Well, their source is Joe down the street, or just whoever's put the post together. I mean, it just I got to tell you, the complicity of the news media is just it's becoming comical at this point right now. People are fed up. I know here in South Carolina that fortunately we're very close to the local farms and the local sources of food, so we will not be as impacted as you are going to be in the city. But I shudder to think about what's going to happen to those people who have to rely on trucks with diesel going up. Diesel here today sitting at $6 a gallon. Diesel that is needed in trucks, $6 a gallon. That's going to be passed directly on to consumers.
I'm at a point where I don't know who's right. I know when you give a bit, if you do away with government regulations, you have abuse by big corporations. I mean, the drug market is just going crazy. I don't understand it. The medical services, hospitals and things are going crazy. I don't know why. One hospital they did surveys. One hospital charges $1,000 for an operation, and the other hospital charges $15,000 for the same operation.
I agree, and I think it has to do with Medicare and Medi-Cal.
Right, and when you have where drugs that for people to survive, the drugs for diabetes, can cost a family several $1,000s, per month.
Yep.
And they have to choose, who has the drugs.
Disgusting.
There's no reason for that. We're the only, I think I don't know what other country, but we're one of the few industrial countries that does not take our citizens take care of them medically. And
I'll give you a real specific example. I have to take some specific medication that I needed, and I was getting it for $3 and $4 for a 3-month period of time. That same medication, and I thought it was because I had changed insurance companies, but no, it was not. That same medication that had cost me $3 to $4 last week, I went in to get it today, $165. $165. And I asked, I said, why is this? And they said, the company has gone ahead and raised the prices. Fortunately, I was able to go to another different good solid drug, but I agree with you on that. I know that when my late husband needed to have insulin for his diabetes, it was very scary as to how to choose and how to pick. There's certain areas where you and I are absolutely in total agreement, and in terms of regulation with life-saving drugs that are very much needed for individuals. I absolutely, I completely agree with that.
I mean, of course, it costs money for gas, but there are always options. If you, for cars, the option is, yes, you can take public transportation, even though it's may not be as convenient. Most people do not travel hundreds of miles to their location. And there is there is an alternative, but for drugs, there's no alternative. You either
Oh, I
get the
agree.
drugs
But
or you
I
die.
do, but I do have to disagree with you in terms, you realize that most all of the inventories throughout the United States, most of it comes by truck. And many people who are service workers, handyman, plumbers, electricians, what have you, they're traveling throughout. I know that when we had our handyman business prior to us being shut down by COVID, that we were traveling anywhere from 2 to 700 miles in a week period of time. So I once again, the problem, and you and I have talked about this as well. I'm very much in favor. We need a two-party system. We need the Republicans and we need the Democrats, regardless of what you call them. You call them cats or dogs or whatever it is. We need to have the yin and the yang. My concern at this point right now is that the Democrats have gone so far left that it's alienating normal, everyday Americans, that when the midterms come through, there will be a complete washout of the Democratic Party. And what really concerns me is we need to have a good, strong Democratic Party. Now, I know that's considered to be heresy by all of the Republicans and all of that. I really don't care. I'm looking out for Americans, as you're looking out for Americans. But the Democrats have gone so far to the left that most normal people are scratching their head and going, essentially, what the hell is going on here?
Okay, it's what that's what the F is going on. But
I'm a lady, so.
I mean, I totally disagree with you. Because
By what? We need to have two parties?
yeah, I think we have to have like we are. Sometimes I'm almost would go with, in a way to the the British type of government, that you don't have to be necessarily affiliated by a party. You have to be independent. I don't like the fact that when a Republican becomes gets elected, or the Democratic gets elected, they vote as a block. They're no longer independent people who have different views. Because I know, as far as I'm concerned, as far as you're concerned, each different issue has a different way of solving ourselves. So the different issue, you might go with Democrats certain ways, you might go with Republicans other ways as an independent.
Absolutely.
But once they're elected, they don't do that anymore. And how are they elected? They're elected by the big money interests.
Well, yes and no. I do think that there is in fact a revolution coming. I think at this point right now, there are so many average Americans at this point who, rather than giving up hope that and I believe it started with the school board's treatment and subsequently the Department of Justice's labeling of parents as being terrorists. I do believe that there is a revolution coming. And I guess that's probably one of the good things about coronavirus, that we parents were able to find out exactly what was being taught in the school, which was white is bad and black and brown is good. I think that at this point right now, that parents and many normal everyday people are becoming aware that things are just tilting too far to one side. And I think it's going to be an interesting election. I met with I'm getting more politically involved, and I was asked to meet with a number of different candidates this last week. And it was very, very interesting listening to some of their takes. And they are getting massive amounts of support. And once again, I am one that likes to go, I'm a moderate. I want what's best for everybody. I don't want the poor to be underserved. I don't want the rich to be overserved, to be very honest with you. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I mean, don't you agree? You can only drive so many Mercedes,
Well, no, I can't drive a lot. You have 7 days a week.
I know.
Instead, it might be cheaper to get a new Mercedes than to fill her up with gas. But,
well, I mean, but for example, Pete Buttigieg saying his comment saying about gasoline, that this is a great way to be able to get an electric vehicle, an electric car. I mean, for God's sakes, man. I mean, these automobiles are sitting at $40,000 to $170,000 for these electric cars.
Again, they're talking a lot of money with rebating, and cars itself are so damn expensive. Gasoline cars, are expensive. It's not that they're, $60,000 to buy a car. Oh, that's outrageous for an electric. How much does a regular car cost? Between $40,000 and $50,000.
Well,
But
once
anyway,
again, we haven't had a new car in a long, long
right.
time. We've
The thing
always
that I,
bought
I, I
used.
want to bring up what you said. So do you
Mhm.
don't think that they should teach about about slavery,
Oh,
about
of
the
course they're gonna,
slavery was wrong?
you bet, you doggone well better
You
be
know,
talking about slavery.
you don't think they should talk about like the Brown versus the Board of Education,
No, of course they should be
where
talking
black,
about
well,
that,
they want to
but
do
they
away
should
with
not,
that.
but they should not, no, they don't. They should not be demonizing one race over another. I mean, Martin
No,
Luther
no,
King talked about
I'm not
that.
saying that, but they are trying to rewrite history. Do you think that they shouldn't, that story should be not, our public should not know about the Holocaust?
Oh, absolutely not, for crying out loud. But I don't want to have one group, because of the color of their skin, demonized because of another group
Yeah,
being the oppressor versus the
again,
oppressed. That's
I agree.
absurd.
I agree with you. You don't throw a blanket over everybody, but you
No,
have to acknowledge that there was slavery. You have to acknowledge
absolutely.
that there is discrimination. I couldn't, there's certain sports clubs that I couldn't join. Why? I'm Jewish. And this was going back to the 60s
And
and
there were
70s.
certain sports clubs that I couldn't go into in Los Angeles when I was a young news reporter because I was a woman.
Right.
Absolutely. Was that
Right.
right? No. But
Right.
guess what? Once again, you learn, you change, but once again, you don't demonize
Well, you
people
don't
because
diminish
they
it.
are white or because they're Jewish.
No, but they, or certain groups, as you say, well, certain, the liberal groups, certain conservative groups don't want this taught at all.
Well, once again, it's the yin and the yang. I want to come into a sense of moderation. I'm
Right.
also not happy with the coverage, the news coverage of this new Florida law talking about the anti-gay law that they're supposedly trying to pass. Well, excuse me, if you actually read the bill, Malcolm, it says that they don't want to talk about sex education to children that are between the ages of 5 to 8 years old.
Right.
You know what? I got to tell you, it was traumatic enough for me to get sex education when I was about 13 years old, for crying out loud. I certainly don't want a 5-year-old to have to go through what I went through.
I got
Scary enough.
I got my sexual education on 36th Street in Coney
I don't
Island.
want to hear about your sexual encounter, for crying out
No, it
loud.
wasn't a countess, but my education was, when I was 12, 13 years old, to be friends with her 17, 18 years old.
I
That's how
know,
I
but you were
sex.
13 years old. You weren't 5 years old, for crying out
Yeah,
loud.
well, I don't think they're advocating sexual education for 5-year-olds, but they are
Yes,
doing.
they did. You read the bill? They're saying at this point right now, you cannot talk about sexual identity with kids that are in pre-K all the way up to third grade. I have to agree with that. Leave kids alone. Allow them to play. Allow them to understand there's boys and there's girls, there's cats and dogs.
Well,
For crying out loud, it's not anti-gay.
I have, well, not experiences, but I know of people whose children who are like 5, 6, 7 years old are, sort of like are showing preference, like boys with nail polish, want to wear dresses. So you don't talk, I mean, you don't talk about it, but you have to, acknowledge it. You can't
Well,
just
like,
go.
for example, I was a tomboy, okay, and there was nothing wrong with it. I enjoyed having my jeans, all scraped up and torn and all of that. I enjoyed playing around in the mud. And of course, my mother, being a 1950s woman,
Right.
was a little bit concerned about it, but would sit down with me and they were amusing conversations. You know what? You turned out fine. I turned out fine.
Well,
The bottom line is, leave kids alone. Leave the adult stuff away from children.
Right, but don't. But if a kid, has if a boy has a feminine instincts or a girl has masculine instincts, you don't say, no, no, don't do that.
No, I mean, but
Right,
once again, it's called tolerance. It's called tolerance. But to label it as being a conservative and a Republican bash on gayness, oh, baloney. That's just such malarkey.
Again, everybody throwing a blanket. There's no degrees. It's like there are many shades of black, many shades of white, the many colors in the rainbow, and in each color there's gradations of them.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to make life simplistic. Life is not simplistic. Life
No,
is,
it's not. But you know what? I think that tolerance is just a very, very important. Tolerance of people. And I think that Americans, for the most part, are an extremely tolerant group.
I,
Sure, there was slavery. Sure, there was horrible situation with whites on one side of the bus and quote unquote coloreds on the other side of the bus. Absolutely. But things have changed. The country has evolved, and it should be getting some credit for that. And I got to tell you, I'm not happy with the way BLM points out and says that the white skin is basically the aggressor, and I don't appreciate that. That's not the way this country needs to run.
well, the country had, when I grew up, it was called WASPs.
Mhm,
The ones who controlled the country, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
mhm. And it was very fun. I remember my mom sitting down with me and she said, "Do you know what this name is? Do you know what this name is?" And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think I already told you about the story. We live next door to a Japanese family. And my mom one day sat down with me and said, "You know, Deb, you are good friends with Susie next door." And I said, "Yeah, I'm great friend. Did you notice there's anything different with Susie? And have you noticed anything different?" Of course, she was from Japan. I said, no, but I really like the grandfather. "Oh, you really like the grandfather, but did you notice there's anything different about them?" I said, "Yes, there is something different." My mom said, "Okay, what was it? What is it?" And I said, "They have the best aquarium I have ever seen in my entire life."
Well,
My mother laughed and was like, "Okay, so I want you to understand." And she explained to me about World War II and the Japanese and the internment camps and all of that. That sort of gentle history coming from my mom was an important part of education, as was, I remember one Halloween, I wanted to go in blackface. And my mother sat down with me and said, "We need to have another discussion." I said,
That's not-
"Oops, oops."
I'm still not, well, again, I'm not black, but I'm still not sure about the thing with blackface, how bad it is if you don't make a parody of being in blackface.
Well, I think the problem, and the way my mom explained it was that you had to be sensitive to other people's feelings. And that's what she wanted me to do. She says, "I know that you would not, misconstrue it or make it a bad thing or make fun of it. But she says it could be misconstrued. And
Right.
for example, I would watch, did you ever watch Amos and Andy?
Yeah, that guy, that's no longer, that was taken off the air.
I know, but I loved watching Amos and Andy. And my mother was very concerned that I was watching it, okay, because it was a comedy about black families and black families. I believe it was in Harlem, as a matter of fact. But I was so young. But what I loved about it was just the sheer slapstick comedy. It was even funnier than the Three Stooges because it was just funny comedy.
Well,
And
originally that was on radio, and the two, and Amos and Andy were both white.
yes, isn't that
But the,
funny?
the whole upshot, because we have to go, the time is up. But the whole
Oh,
upshot is that we both agree that there's no black, there's no white, there are many shades in between, and that
yeah,
you can't go one way and the other way, that no one is 100% right or 100% wrong. You have to talk it out. And even
yeah,
though sometimes with the words we don't agree, even you and I
yeah,
don't agree,
yep,
but it's the way things are done. And it done, there has to be a little give and take.
yes.
But anyway, with that note, let's hope there's still a world when we get back next Friday.
There will be. There's a lot of good people out there. There's good people like you and me. We may come from different political sides and from different philosophies, but ultimately we're Americans. We love this country. We love this world. We love the people, and we need to find more of that commonality right now because
Right.
it's important.
Well, the same way I feel like I'm an American and I'm proud of it,
Mhm.
but I'm not like only an American. I'm a citizen of I like to feel I'm a citizen of the world.
We
I
are.
like to figure out that I'm no better as an American than someone who's Japanese, from Japan, or even Russians, the people we're talking
Absolutely.
about.
Yeah.
And I think, again, I don't know what the answer is. I know all the questions, but I think
Well,
that
you know what? I think the answer is more talking. I think there is the answer of just coming back to the commonality and the common sense of everyday living and not allowing people to take advantage of their position. And they have to remember that as elected officials, that they need to work towards the overall benefit of all Americans, not just themselves, but to all Americans.
I'm just thinking, I think everyone should read Animal Farm.
Oh, God, that's a scary one.
Anyway, I'll see you next week.
All right, sounds great. Have a wonderful weekend, my dear.
You too.
All
Bye.
righty, bye-bye.